Okay, I guess I begin here. My name's Will Snyder, and I work with Massachusetts Envirothon Steering Committee. I work in particular on the current issue, developing resources for that every year. So we usually have a big workshop at UMass Amherst in the fall, but past 2 years we haven't been able to do that. So instead we have these webinars which actually get recorded, and so maybe you're watching it at a different time. In any case, one of the reasons for these workshops is it's a chance for you to get a sense of not only of the field that we're talking about, which is zero waste and solid waste management, but it's also a chance for you to meet and talk to people who are involved in that field, because you're going to be doing community research, and you're going to be talking with people like this in your own community in order to prepare for your current issue presentation. Today we have Marissa Perez-Dormitzer. She's a waste reduction manager for New Bedford and Dartmouth in southeastern Massachusetts. Someone in your community has her job. They're responsible for arranging recycling and waste management, coordinating that. And they're also responsible for educating the public about recycling and what they need to do to take care of waste in your community. So today, this is a chance to listen to and talk to somebody, hear the kinds of terms that they use, the ways they think about the issue. So you'll be better prepared when you ask questions in your own community research. So I encourage you to ask questions if you're able to be online with us. So Marissa, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I also encourage all of us, including me, to ask questions when we have them. And Marissa said that she's willing to pause and listen and answer, because that's the way it's going to work in your own interviews in your community. So Marissa, thank you so much for coming to join us.
Thank you so much, Will, for this opportunity. I'm really happy to be here to share information about recycling and waste reduction in New Bedford and Dartmouth. And so I'll just clarify, I do work for the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District, and there are a few other refuse districts in the state of Massachusetts, and we serve both the city of New Bedford and the town of Dartmouth, but I don't work for either community. I work for a refuse district. So I thought I would just share quickly. I know there are going to be folks watching this from other parts of the state, and so this shows where we're located in southeastern Massachusetts. And I mentioned there are two communities that we serve again. So the city of New Bedford and the town of Dartmouth. So first, I thought I'd provide a little overview of what I'll talk about. I wanted to do an introduction to the two communities and their programs. Then I'll talk about our role, and our being we. The refuse district has a waste reduction office, and there are 3 of us who work on these efforts. And so I'll be talking in more detail about what kinds of projects we've worked on. And then moving to the future, I'll talk about projects that we are hoping to be working on in the future. So that's the exciting part. And then I'll wrap up with a listing of some resources for where you might get more information in your community or at the state level as well. So to dive in, so first we have the city of New Bedford with a population of around 95,000. In this pic, let me see if I can get a laser. Oh, I can't. Okay. So in this picture, you can see here, this is Meg, who is part of our waste reduction office for the refuse district. This is Jess, who works for the city and is a recycling inspector. We also call her the waste reduction enforcement coordinator. So she does do enforcement and give out tickets to people who are not following the rules. And then the other staff are temps or other city inspectors. So every once in a while we do projects where we hire temporary staff to help us get things done. So taking a look at New Bedford's program, over the years, both communities have made big efforts to try to cut down on the amount of waste that is generated. And in New Bedford in 2014, they went to an automated collection program. So that means that instead of setting out your trash in a barrel or just setting out a bag at the curb and having, you might see the man on the back of the truck or the young woman hanging off the back of the truck and they throw that bag in the back. This is different. And you may have this kind of program in your community where there's a truck with the arms that go out and pick up these carts that you can see in the picture. And so when the city went to this program, the amount of trash decreased by 30% and the amount of recycling increased by 100%. And the key is that residents are limited in the amount of trash they can set out to this cart. The blue lid cart is for trash and the orange lid cart is for recycling. So residents can't set out any more trash than in the carts that they're provided with. So that's really helped to incentivize them to recycle more. And so that program has really worked out well. Yes, Will.
Okay, so has the actual, so each of these containers weighs something, weighs as, you know, has contents that weigh something. Has the total amount of waste, recycling and trash decreased, or has it stayed the same, or has it increased? Do you know that?
I do, and I have some graphs later on to show you. Yes, the graphs actually, thinking about it, only show disposed waste. So I don't have a graph with the total, but that is a really good question. I would say that overall, I don't think that the total has gone down. I will talk more about some of the projects we've been working on. They've been more focused on recycling as opposed to waste reduction. But as we move ahead, looking toward the future, we'll be working more on reducing the total amount of waste generated. So, great question. So then in terms of some additional programs that the city offers, they collect yard waste April through mid-December. This is actually the last week of yard waste pickup. They also collect brush and then the Christmas trees once a year. That'll be happening soon. One thing unique to New Bedford is that they collect cardboard from businesses at no charge to the business. So small to medium-sized businesses can set out cardboard once a week. Cardboard is a really valuable material. We want to keep it out of our landfill and get it recycled into new products. And so we're fortunate the city offers that program. They also collect bulky items at the curb. Bulky item would be, I see my office, a filing cabinet. At home, you might have a couch or a mattress, something like that, that certainly doesn't fit in your trash cart at home. And so you can set up an appointment to have it picked up at the curb. And then finally, the city has a recycling center where they accept more items. So not just the typical bottles and cans and paper and cardboard that you can set out in your recycling cart, but also propane tanks. They take styrofoam blocks, clothing. They also have an extra container for the regular curbside recyclables. So if someone were to have a party and generate a lot more bottles and cans, they can drop it off at the recycling center. I also want to add that the collection program, so trash, recycling, yard waste, the cardboard route, and the bulky items, they're collected by ABC Disposal through a contract with the city. So the city isn't sending city staff out to pick up these items. There's a vendor that does it on behalf of the city. All right, so then moving on to Dartmouth.
Can I just say, Marissa, that's a really important point for people to kind of pay attention to, because sometimes your trash collection is done by the city. Sometimes it's done by a private trash collector, it's a private business. And you should figure out how your community has done that. Yeah,
good. So this is the town. It's more of a suburban community, different than the city that has a smaller population of around 34,000. And in this picture, you can see there I am on the right, Meg, who is in my office on the left. And then there is Jen, who works at the Dartmouth Department of Public Works. So in the town of Dartmouth, this program is run out of their, we call it the DPW for short, the Department of Public Works. And so Jen is the person who we work closely with in trying to implement new programs and do outreach. So it's a really great partnership. It works really well. And I had mentioned that in New Bedford, they have implemented programs to reduce waste. So in Dartmouth, they have as well. In Dartmouth, they've moved to this, what they call the SMART program, which is often funny because I'll have to ask folks, are you a SMART customer as opposed to a non-SMART customer? But SMART stands for Save Money and Reduce Trash. Some other communities call this a pay-as-you-throw program, where all the trash has to go in these special town bags. In Dartmouth, they're orange, as you can see. And this was implemented in 2007, so it's been a while, but the result is that trash went down by 50%. So it's really reduced the amount of trash that's generated in Dartmouth. And then in 2012, they went to this the carts for recycling. And they're a little unique in that they have this gray lid cart you can see here, and that's for bottles and cans. And then, so that's picked up 1 week. And then the next week they pick up a black lid cart, which is for paper and cardboard. So it's what you'd call a dual stream program or two stream program. And the result is that the material is a little bit cleaner because the residents have done some sorting already. This is different than New Bedford's program with that orange lid cart where all the recyclables, the bottles, cans, paper, cardboard, all go in that one cart. But this program has been really successful for the town of Dartmouth. I can mention a few additional programs. The town picks up yard waste. It's a little less frequently than in New Bedford. It's in the spring and the fall. They also pick up those Christmas trees once a year. They collect bulky items, like we mentioned, that would be a mattress or a dining room set, those larger items for a fee at the curb. And then with residents having a little bit less access to the yard waste pickup at the curb, it's very popular for residents to drop off their yard waste at the water pollution control facility, which is behind the DPW office. So a lot of people will bring their yard waste or their brush there when that curbside program isn't happening. And then finally, Dartmouth has a transfer station where residents can drop off all kinds of things, styrofoam blocks, clothing, used motor oil. A new thing is that they're now accepting string lights year round. And so we know string lights aren't always used for the holiday season, and residents can drop them off anytime now, which is really helpful. And I will mention just a few more programs. We talked about New Bedford's, the city's programs, the town's programs, and these are additional programs that the refuse district is involved in. We run 2 household hazardous waste drop-off days each year in the spring and the fall. Residents drop off all kinds of things like oil-based paint, pesticides, old gas, things like that. So it's a really great opportunity for residents to drop off those items that they might not want to keep in their home and that they're done using. We also run paper shredding days twice a year. I won't mention that shredded paper is not recyclable at home. So in your recycling cart at home, many years ago, we used to instruct residents to put it either in the paper bags or in clear plastic bag with the idea that if it's contained, that's better, and then it could be recycled. But the problem is that once it goes to a recycling facility, those bags just break open and it ends up like confetti or snow, and it's really hard to try to recover those little bits of paper and recycle them into a new product. And so it's not recycled at the curb or in your cart or in your blue bin. And because of that, we offer these paper shredding days in conjunction with the city of New Bedford and the town of Dartmouth. We actually held one in Fairhaven recently as well, expanding a little bit. Residents can bring their confidential documents to be shredded. And with this event, that paper is recycled because it's already all shredded paper in one truck. And so they are able to recycle it that way. So we have been trying to increase the number of paper shredding days that we offer to try to help residents recycle that paper, like the old tax forms or bank statements and things like that. So the last thing I'll mention is that the refuse district offers compost bins. We've been more actively advertising the compost bins. We've recently done a giveaway where for the first, I don't know, certain number, maybe 10 residents in each community that buy a compost bin during certain times of the year, they can get a stainless steel bucket to keep on their kitchen counter. So that way they can accumulate their food waste in there and then bring it out to the compost bin. So home composting is a really great option for diverting food waste from the landfill. So we've been trying to encourage that as much as possible. So are there any questions before I keep going?
Are you going to tell us what happens to the yard waste eventually?
Sure, I could tell you that. So there are actually two streams. There's the yard waste, which is leaves, grass, and twigs. And then there's what we call brush, which are the branches, anything a 1/4 inch thick to 4 inches in thickness. So the yard waste gets composted. So you can imagine if you have thick branches, they're not really compostable. It takes a really long time for them to break down. So the yard waste gets composted at the refuse district's landfill. So we run a landfill, the Crapo Hill landfill, and that yard waste is composted there. So both communities bring their yard waste there. And then the brush is ground up, it's chipped. And then it's used around the site of the landfill. I actually just heard this week that they often use the wood chips when the roads are muddy. It helps so the trucks can still go over the roads and not get stuck at the landfill. So they'll use them around the site in whatever way they need.
Okay. And that's not food waste.
It is not food waste. No, I'll talk about what we're doing for food waste because that's the way of the future. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. Excellent. So this is a picture that shows the three of us in the refuse district's waste reduction office. So you can see there I am on the left. This is Janet and there's Meg again. So the three of us work together to plan all sorts of programs to reduce waste in the two communities. I will point out that it's the only picture I had, but it is an important picture. It looks like we're doing the dishes, but we're not. A few years ago, we realized that just in our office that when we were eating our lunch, we would go in the kitchen and grab paper towels, which would end up in the trash. And so we realized that we shouldn't be doing that. And so we actually bought towels that we now use in our office and we'll just bring them home to wash them. So we're not using paper towels, the disposable towels. All right, so I mentioned briefly our team. We work with the city, we work with the town of Dartmouth. This is us. And then I'll add on that a lot of the efforts that we do are funded through grants from Mass DEP, which is the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So they have been very kind to us. And so we're able to implement all sorts of programs to reduce waste in the two communities. And before I dive into the details of some of the projects that we have done, I wanted to just briefly mention why do we try to reduce waste? Why is that important? There are obviously many reasons. We save resources when we reduce waste. We can have positive impacts on climate change by reducing waste, especially food waste. But I'll point out the landfill. We run the landfill where the trash goes in New Bedford and Dartmouth. So we're very fortunate in that we have this landfill because many other communities in the state are two things, having to pay more, but also now starting to have to send their trash out to other states, not in Massachusetts, because over time the landfills have closed, the waste to energy facilities are aging. And so we treat the landfill as a resource. We want to work to extend the life of the landfill as much as we can. It's right now, it's estimated to last another 8 years, but we're actually going through a planning process where we're looking for opportunities for extending the life of the landfill. So that's an important piece of what we do. So then I have my graphs. So I'm thinking about, well, what's going in that landfill? So this is a graph for Dartmouth. It starts in 2013 and goes to 2020. It's the tons of waste that's disposed by the residents. You can see there is some up and down, but the general trend is that the waste is increasing, unfortunately. But it is good for us to keep track of this so we can try to intervene and work on programs to reduce waste. New Bedford's graph is a bit different. You may recall that I had mentioned in 2014, the city implemented that cart program. And if you remember, all of the trash has to fit in the carts that the residents get. So some communities will have an option for overflow, where if you have a party or something, you can go out and get one of those bags, like a pay-as-you-throw bag, so you can dispose of extra trash. But we don't have that. It's just completely limited to those carts that are provided. So it's really clear that trajectory of the waste generation. The program started in mid-2014, and then we've gone down here in 2015 to the bottom, but then gradually it has creeped up. Our waste generation has creeped up. Some of it is likely due to the pandemic, but clearly there's an upward trend. So we need to do some work to bring the, decrease the amount of waste we're disposing of in the landfill.
So,
yep.
What happened to all that waste? It's like a third of the waste. Somehow people reduce their waste by a third.
Great question.
Over 2 years. How did they do that, and what? Where did that go? If it didn't, maybe it meant that they bought less, or bought things with less packaging, or any. But somehow,
perhaps. Yeah. So one thing that changed, you might have noticed the orange lid recycling cart. In New Bedford, we used to use the blue bins where residents would set out, and it was the dual stream program, paper and cardboard in one bin and bottles and cans in the other. And so we've vastly increased the amount of capacity they have for recycling. And recycling became mandatory at that time. So some of the city's ordinances were adjusted when the program was implemented. And so whereas recycling wasn't mandatory, I've been in the position for many years, 22 years. So back then I used to estimate that about 50% of the households participated in the recycling program. But now, in order to fit your trash in that trash cart, I mean, the great majority, there may be a handful, but likely 95% are in some capacity recycling. And so that has helped. There was a bit of a loss of customers. So there was a time where there were certain multi-families that were just kind of grandfathered in the program. They set out trash, it was collected. And so also as part of this, the city got a better handle on who they wanted to be collecting from, because it was very strict. Either you received the cart or you didn't receive a cart. And so it was very clear who was a customer and who was not. The last thing I would mention is that when people have extra trash, we refer them to a local facility, New Bedford Waste Services, which is a facility run by ABC. And so there are people who bring extra trash to that facility. I'm not sure that it's a huge amount, but I think between all of that, it contributed to the decrease.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that recycling was not included in this. That's my bad. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
This is trash.
Trash disposed of at the landfill.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it represents our reduction just in the trash. So like I said, I don't have a graph with the total. Right. All right. So I'm going to move on. So now let's start diving into what do we do in our office. These are the three main things that we focus on: public outreach, program planning, and grants. In terms of public outreach, my coworker Meg often says she wishes she could download all this information into our residents' brains, because it is difficult. People say recycling is simple, but it's not so simple when you're home and dealing with all different packaging types. So in terms of public outreach, I can mention an example. For the holidays, we do a lot of outreach to help people. Again, in New Bedford, you only have that cart for your trash. So if you have gatherings, or if you have a lot of gifts that you need to discard, there's only that space. And so we try to do as much outreach as possible to help people reduce their waste during this time. And I'll note that wrapping paper is not recyclable. So I feel like that's one key, that when everyone's unwrapping these gifts, that wrapping paper cannot go in the recycling cart. We actually encourage people to try to use other things like newspaper or brown packaging paper, all other packaging that possibly could be recycled, or packaging that could be reused, like gift bags. So we will send out flyers in the city's water bills. We just recently sent an email out to all the city employees with all the information about reducing waste, what can you recycle, and then what they really care about is when you can set your Christmas tree out after the holidays. So we've worked to get all that out on our social media as well. So we do our best to reach out to people, but there's always more that we need to be doing. We also help the two communities to implement new programs. When the city went to the CART program, we were very involved in that with the outreach, figuring out who's going to receive the carts, coming up with the list. So we were very active in supporting the city on that program. And then finally, we do try to apply for as many grants that we can, mostly from DEP. That's the main source of our grants, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So I want to mention a few samples of what we do. So I know that we're speaking with students. And so in terms of school recycling, we do our best to do presentations in the schools to educate the students, because they also need to recycle at school, not only at home. And so there is Meg talking to an audience. With the pandemic, we've been doing a little bit less, but we hope to get back to that. And then on the right, you can see Rob, who is the Director of Food Services in the New Bedford schools. So that means he oversees all the cafeteria staff, and there are about 20 plus schools in New Bedford. So he oversees that effort. And I worked with Food Services to apply for a grant from DEP to replace dishwashers in 3 of the schools. So that way they could go from using styrofoam trays, which are single use and just go in the trash, to using reusable trays. And so Rob has implemented that. And he's very eager to reduce waste. He's actually even gone ahead and worked on other schools to replace their dishwashers or repair the dishwashers whenever he can. His goal is to eliminate the styrofoam trays in the New Bedford schools. So then the other project I'll mention that we've spent a fair amount of time on is dealing with contamination in the recycling carts. You can see on the right, you can see this orange lid here. So again, that's the recycling cart, but I don't think this is bottles, cans, paper, or cardboard, definitely not. So this is what we call contamination. It's when we have items in the carts that don't belong. And then on the left, I did notice there are a few, there's a bottle and maybe a few cans in here, but for the most part, it's not your typical recyclable materials. And then in this picture, it actually contains mostly recyclable materials, but the problem is that they're bagged. And so when this material goes to the recycling facility, and I'll mention an acronym here, a MRF. So these recycling sorting facilities are called materials recovery facilities. So it's MRF, M-R-F. So when the material goes to the MRF, they don't have the staff or the equipment to deal with these bags. So they just get thrown out. They don't get recycled at all. So we don't want bagged material. Yes, I see.
I just want to mention to people that in the resource information that Envirothon has sent out to teams, there is a link to a video of what happens at a MRF. So you can see exactly why this would be a problem if there were plastic bags. Yeah.
Excellent. And there is also this loose film. So our main problems are bagged material and then loose plastic wrap and loose plastic bags. And in this picture, you can see some of the equipment at the MRF. So this on the right, it's called a star screen. And so these, it's a funny angle, but these are actually star shaped and they're constantly moving around to help separate the material. The larger materials go over and the smaller materials fall through. But then on the left, you can see what happens when the contamination gets in the recycling stream. So these are plastic bags, all sorts of things. We actually call them tanglers. you might see a phone cord in there. So these are items that can tangle around the machinery at the MRF. And so we call them contamination, and we do our best to remove them by educating residents. So I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things that we've done to deal with contamination. One of them is that a few years ago, both the city and the town applied for what DEP called the REC grant, which is the Waste Reduction Enforcement Coordinator. So that's a position. The key is enforcement. And so this person has the ability to issue fines to residents who are not complying. And so for many years now, the city has had a REC, or we call her recycling inspector, recycling coordinator. And that was Jess, who I pointed out in one of the previous photos. And so she's out there every day looking in recycling carts and leaving residents feedback on whether if they've included things that don't belong. We also have thank you tags to recognize the residents to say, hey, you did a good job. So then another thing we have are decals. A few years ago, the city purchased around 20,000 decals to put on the lids of the recycling carts. We figured since the city staff were ramping up the enforcement, we wanted to make sure it was crystal clear what residents should put in the recycling cart. So it's right on the lid as they're putting the items in there to make it clear. And then finally, we implemented what's called the Recycling IQ Kit. And this is something that may possibly have been implemented in the community where you live. It's something run by DEP, where the general idea is that there are people, temps or staff, that go around and look in recycling carts in specific neighborhoods, but they do this for multiple weeks. And when there are carts with contamination, they're actually left behind. And so it sends a message to the resident, hey, you gotta stop putting the plastic bags or bagging your recyclables. And it's been very effective. So we implemented that for 2 years in both communities. I believe I have, oh, yep, this is the decal. We're actually in the process of making some tweaks to it. So this is the decal that's going on the recycling carts in New Bedford. It's in English and Spanish. In here, you can see a picture of someone applying the decals. That's been a very big effort to get the 20,000 decals on the recycling carts, so you can imagine. So then I wanted to talk about some future efforts, like where we're headed. So food waste is a really important one. I know Will mentioned that. There are organizations that will sometimes do what are called waste characterization studies. So where they will take a look at the waste that's disposed of in a landfill or a waste to energy facility and try to figure out what is in that waste to see if there are opportunities to divert waste. And so out of those studies, we find that about 20% of the waste that's disposed, so the waste that we're all putting out in our trash carts or trash barrels, is food waste. And so that is a really big opportunity to reduce waste to, if you remember those graphs, they're going in the wrong direction. So we're hoping by addressing food waste that we can start bringing those down. And this is one project that we are currently working on, which we're really excited on. It's the first time we are collecting food waste in New Bedford. These carts were provided by a vendor, and these are in the high school. We're working with 2 schools, the high school and an elementary school, and this is showing the food waste. So the Jacobs Elementary School has been setting out food waste for the last few weeks. So that's now not going to the landfill. It's not going in their dumpster. So it's really exciting. We're hoping to do even more with this, perhaps offer food waste as an item that is accepted at the recycling center in New Bedford or the transfer station in Dartmouth. And then also perhaps consider a curbside program, which is something Black Earth Compost, you can see here on the card, it's something that they offer. So we're looking into those kinds of programs to start addressing the food waste that is going in the trash. Yep.
At this point, producers of more than a certain amount of food waste have to divert it from the waste stream, right?
Correct. So that actually leads on to my slide about textiles. So the idea is that there are waste bans that DEP has, which ban certain items from going in our landfill, like bottles and cans, cardboard. And so with the food waste, it has been that if an organization, an entity generates at least 1 ton of food waste in a week, that they then have to divert it. They can't dispose of it. So they meet this threshold of being required to do something else with it, get it composted, donated, all those different options. But starting in November 2022, that will go down to a 1/2 ton. So that will start to impact possibly restaurants. I've heard a certain number of high schools in the state, maybe 30 high schools, will need to then separate out their food waste because of it. But again, it'll go into effect in November 2022. And another thing that will be banned is textiles. So that's something that we're trying to think about how we can address. And we're really excited. I've just started a partnership with Big Brother, Big Sister to collect textiles, which is clothing, linens, sheets, that kind of material, to collect it at the curb. So where residents can make an appointment and a truck will go by and pick it up right in front of your house. They'll even pick it up on your front porch. And so in this way, we hope to make a dent in the what we call textiles that are going in the trash. So again, textiles, like I have 4 children, so textiles would be their stained clothes, the clothes they outgrown. Those are examples of what we mean by textiles. And you may have known about the programs with the bins. There are a lot of clothing bins in many communities. We actually keep a map of all of them so we can direct our residents there, which are a great option, but it seems that we're not diverting enough just with those bins. And so that's why we're looking at these type of programs. All right, any other questions before I go on, Will?
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I had to take a call and I missed a little piece of that, but one question I had about food was, well, one of the things that we've introduced them to in the resource materials is the food recovery pyramid, which demonstrates or points out that composting is like the last resort. What you want to do before that is find a way to feed it to other people or feed it to animals. And that picture from the school was like,
yes,
this is one of my conundrum questions that I have. That is that since the pandemic, a lot of school systems, maybe most school systems, have gone to providing free breakfast and lunch to everybody who wants it. It's just free. That can generate a lot of waste, not just food waste, but packaging waste. So my question is, and I hope that students will think about this as in their cafeterias, is we've got a social justice question on the one hand. People need food. We want people to have access to healthy food. We know that the school breakfast and lunch programs work. On the other hand, it's generating tons of wasted food, and it's when everything is individually packaged, that is another big problem. How are we going to deal with this? It's an important question, I think. And maybe there are people out there who are trying to answer it. I don't know.
And it's a great question. I will point out that I hope that by diverting the food waste, that they'll be able to get an idea what is wasted and hopefully adjust their ordering based on that. The person who's in charge of food services at the school, Jacob School, seems to be really proactive about reducing waste. So I think by separating out the food waste, it actually can help because people will actually see what's being wasted as opposed to it getting mixed in the regular trash. I know in New Bedford, they do have share tables. So if someone, doesn't want an apple, I guess we see in the picture, they do have a share table, though with the pandemic, I'm not sure if those have been affected. I don't know. And I will point out that, at Jacobs, the head of food services said that there was a problem with the apples, that they were damaged. And so I can see some bruises on them, but I agree. My one thought was, well, could we make applesauce out of them if they're not so, physically appealing, or even the bananas? I make a lot of banana bread at home, but I know there's only so much staff and so much time. But again, hopefully by seeing this waste, that will start to make an impact. All right. Oh, so I wanted to just mention a few things we're doing to work on more waste reduction. On the left, you can see a social media post, and I'll point out on Facebook, we're on New Bedford Recycling and Dartmouth Recycling. On Instagram, we are New Bedford Recycling, and on Twitter, I believe it's NB Recycling. So this post shows one of our giveaways that we're doing for different items to help the residents reduce waste or reduce plastic in their home. This was our giveaway in December, the shampoo and conditioner bars. And they do say that by using a shampoo and conditioner bar, that is equal to the amount in one or even perhaps two bottles of shampoo or conditioner. Obviously, it depends on the size of those bottles. But by using these bars, you're not using plastic. So this is one of our giveaways. We're currently giving away reusable bags. They're I have one in my purse. They're Chico bags that they fold up into a pouch, so you can throw them in your purse, and then you have them with you when you're going shopping instead of taking one of the plastic bags or even the paper bags. Reusable is always better than either option, than any single-use option. Reuse is better. So we've continued with these giveaways. We've done them, I believe it's August through March that we have giveaway items that were funded through a grant. And there's two benefits in that it helps us to get the word out that these items are available. They might not be things that people are normally shopping for. Gets the word out about waste reduction to get people thinking about what they're doing in their homes. But then it also helps for the winners. It gets those items in their hands so they can actually try them out. Two of our winners actually were very kind. They shared photos of themselves with the products. So I'm hoping by role modeling, showing them using these products, it will help to encourage other folks to do the same. And then here on the right, this is Bethany she's the children's librarian in New Bedford, the library department in New Bedford. And I had worked with her to set up a lending library, also called the Library of Things, where residents can borrow items instead of buying them. I'll give the example of the ukulele she's holding. So let's say your brother, sister, son, or daughter would like to try out the ukulele. Instead of going out and buying a ukulele, you can borrow one and then see if they're going to stick with it or not. So there are all kinds of items like that. There's games, technology. So that's been a great resource. It started during the pandemic, so it's had a slow start, but we're hoping more and more people will become aware of it as time goes on. All right, so I was going to dive into resources, some of which we've talked about a little bit before, not this one actually. So DEP has come up with an initiative called Recycle Smart MA, and you can see there's their website. And part of the goal of the initiative was to develop a universal list of recyclables for the state. So we found there were communities next to each other where one community had a certain list. So these are the items that are accepted in the recycling. And then the neighboring community had a completely different list. And so DEP has gone through this effort where they've met with the recycling facilities in the state, those MRFs, as we said, to come up with this list, and it's in the form of this recyclopedia. So you can see here, recyclopedia, can I recycle it? You type the item in the white box and then you'll get the answer. So I have a few examples. This is pizza. So these are some of our more common questions. What about the pizza box? Can I recycle it? So years ago, we used to tell people to rip off the clean lid and recycle that, and then the bottom with the grease would go in the trash. But the guidance has changed now. And so if you see here, it says pizza box empty, no food. So as long as the pizza box is empty, it can go in the recycling. So best option, recycling. They've done studies and found that even with the grease on it, that they're able to turn that cardboard into new paper products. So it's a desirable item. We want that in the recycling carts and recycling bins. And here's another one, which we've talked about, the shredded paper. So again, you would type it in that box and then you get the result. So here it is, trash. So the shredded paper does not go in the recycling, it would go in the trash. So this is a really helpful resource that we share with all of the residents in case they have questions. Maybe they don't want to call us every time, then they can go on that website and look up the various items. It's very helpful.
And that's good for all of Massachusetts, every town?
It is. So it's recyclesmartma.org. Yes. So it is the state's universal list. So everyone in the state follows this list now. Yep. And there are other resources on this website. There are flyers and pictures and different things to help educate people about recycling. I think there are case studies highlighting different communities. All right, so I believe we've talked a bit about this, but just to summarize, if you wanted to reach out to your community to learn more about what kinds of programs they offer for recycling or reducing waste, you can contact, if there is a refuse district, there's more than one refuse district in the state. It's not just us. There's also a recycling cooperative, the South Shore Recycling Cooperative. So that may be a resource to you. There's also the Department of Public Works. So as I mentioned, different communities will manage waste in different departments. So in New Bedford, I don't think I mentioned, it's the Department of Facilities and Fleet Management. So facilities and fleet management, you wouldn't think they handle solid waste, but they do. But then in Dartmouth, it's the DPW, the Department of Public Works. Where I live in Mattapoisett, it is the Board of Health. Or it could also be a health department. And then in Rochester, I believe it's the highway department that handles solid waste. So there are definitely handled in different departments locally. And then on the state level, there's DEP, like I said, great resource, great staff. And then Mass Recycle is the professional recycling organization for the state. So they are also a great resource for information. So this is my information. I am more than happy to help anyone. I do know some of the other recycling folks in the state. So if you needed any help to get pointed in the right direction, I'm more than happy to help out with that. Feel free to follow our social media as well. So there's my phone number and my email. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Marissa.
Great.
I have some questions.
Okay.
If I could, you may have answered some of these, I don't know. You showed us two bins, examples of contaminated recycling. So I'm thinking about the poor collector who's out there in a truck and opens the bin and sees that. What are they supposed to do with that? What happens in that case?
So it varies. In some communities where there are the automated trucks with the arms, the driver is not getting out. They just use the arms to empty it. They don't have to go out and lift up the lid. So in some cases, they might not see it. In other cases, some of those trucks have cameras, and so they can see after the fact, as it's being dumped, that there was a problem. I know in Dartmouth, if a driver were to see that, they call it into the office. Well, actually, they leave it behind and then call it into the office. So that way, in case the office gets a call, they know what the problem is. So communities handle it differently. I have heard of some communities where the drivers will have tags. I don't have any next to me. They're with the IQ kit, DEP developed these oops tags and thank you tags. And so I believe there are some drivers in some communities that may carry those tags and they can then leave it on the cart. They just twist tie and they can mark off. It's very easy. Like they're the main items and you just check off this was in there and then the cart gets left behind. DEP was very strong about leaving carts behind. They felt like that was the most effective way for residents to make a change. So it just varies by community.
Yeah. So here's another question. So say I'm a resident who's very conscientious and I put out clean recyclables. I've checked them on that website you gave us to make sure that they're recyclable. For example, there are a lot of plastic containers I have in my house that contain different kinds of plastic. But I put it all in the bin because it's all plastic containers. Does all that get recycled, or Does some of it go to the landfill, or does some of it go to waste to energy? How does that work?
It's a great question. I know there's a lot out there about plastics. And so for the two communities that I serve, when a resident sets those items out at the curb, they're picked up in that cart and they go in the truck and they get sent to a recycling sorting facility. Is there a guarantee that every single item is recycled? No. As you may have heard that some of the items used to go to China, and then there are some companies that unfortunately were questionable that they may not have actually been recycling the materials where we were told they were. I do know that there are markets. So with recycling, the idea is that these are commodities that we want to make something out of. So there are companies that want to buy these things. That's how the recycling works. There are many people who ask, well, why can't we recycle this? Why can't we recycle that? But the idea is recycling is closing the loop. You get it collected, you can get it then turned into a new product. And so with those plastics, I mean, currently there are companies that are buying plastics and making new things out of them. Like I said, I can't say for sure that every single plastic is recycled, but I do know there's a market for recyclables. And the pricing for these recyclables has gone up in the past few years. There was a time when China said they were no longer going to take these items, the recyclables from the other countries. And at that point, the prices bottomed out for recycling. These are commodities again, but the prices in the past year or so have gone up. So these are desirable materials. So no one wants to pay all the money to and all the effort. Residents set it out, we send a truck there, we send it to a recycling facility, sort it, and all that for it to go in the trash. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I would say that the great majority of it is actually recycled into new products. Sure, if machines aren't working properly, or perhaps there are items that they don't have a great market for, perhaps they don't end up recycled, but I would say the great majority is actually recycled. Yes.
So I have my other question, my peanut butter question, which I'm not sure has an answer, but it's something that I've thought about ever since the Envirothon decided to go with this zero waste topic this year. And that is that I buy peanut butter and it comes in plastic jars, and I scrape as much peanut butter as I can out of it and eat it. But there's always some residue left, and it's pretty greasy and messy. And the only way I can really get it clean enough to, I assume I have to have it, maybe it doesn't have to be clean to go into the recycling, but I clean it. But I feel badly because I have to use hot water, which is using energy, and it's using a water resource. And then I rinse it. Maybe I don't have to rinse it. So the question is it worth it? Is it worth the water and energy that I'm using, and soap that I'm using to clean that, in order to put that into the recycling in the larger scheme of protecting the Earth's resources?
Sure, it's a great question. And like you said, there's probably no perfect answer. I will say personally, my dogs are very helpful at emptying my peanut butter jars out. So we don't use soap to clean them out. The dogs do, and they're very effective at it. So the plastic, like I said, I mean, it can be recycled. Over time, and what we've learned with DP and these new projects that they've done, they say that the recyclables should be empty. They don't say they need to be spotless. There are some residents who called and said they run their recyclables through the dishwasher, which obviously that's a lot of resources going to that and unnecessary. So the general guidance is that items need to be empty. Certainly if you have a peanut butter jar with chunks of peanut butter all around the sides, then no. We also sometimes get questions from elderly folks who have trouble washing these things out. So in that case, we say, just throw it out. If you can't really clean it out, then throw it out. But I guess my summary would be that it should be empty. It doesn't have to be spotless, but it should be empty. And that's the guidance that we've heard from the state and from other places. And then it can go in the recycling and get recycled into new product, which would be the best thing. instead of filling up landfills or getting burned.
I'm sure I will think of other questions, but I'm glad you've provided us with an email address. And of course, as you said, these questions will be answered differently depending on the community where they are. So people can find a local person to ask these questions, but it's been great that you've been able to introduce us to these topics. We'll have a much better sense of what questions to ask and how to ask them. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Well,
Okay, I guess we'll sign off now, Britta. Bye-bye.